and welcome to Aligned on AI, the podcast, where we have real conversations with business leaders about what's changing in their industries and where AI will actually help. Today, I'm joined by Trisha Gulati, based in New York in the United States, who has spent several years working across technology, automation, and business growth strategy, and now co-owns MergeWorks, a firm that helps companies scale using growth strategy, operational systems, mergers and acquisitions, and increasingly AI-enabled workflows. So in this conversation, we explore practical insights into adopting AI in real businesses where companies often struggle when they first try to implement automation, how AI can help streamline sales and marketing workflows, how technology is changing the way businesses scale and prepare for acquisitions, and some forward-looking ideas around how AI could reshape the way founders run and eventually exit their companies. And as always on this podcast, we'll try to keep things practical rather than theoretical. There's a lot of talk about AI transforming everything overnight, but most business leaders are still trying to work out where on earth to start. So today we're going to explore some very real examples of where AI can genuinely help businesses save time, improve systems and scale operations, and hopefully without requiring anyone to become a software engineer overnight. So Trisha, it's great to have you on the podcast. Could you start by telling us a little about your background and how you first became interested in technology and business?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me, Carl. So, my path into the space came from two completely separate directions, tech and so on the M&A side, I got introduced to Roland Frazier. He's I would say what you'd call an M&A guru. I got introduced to Roland Frazier and his network of coaches when I was in my third year. And that's when I started learning how business acquisitions actually work and how you can grow companies inorganically through that model. So that part of things actually really fascinated me on the business side. And that was how I got involved in MergeWorks. On the tech side, I've sort of always thought like a systems builder. Even growing up, I was great at math. I was problem solver, and I was constantly asking like, how can this be done better? Whether it's in school projects, my daily routines, or just like anything that I was working on. So I spent a lot of time early on in my life building my technical skills in comparison to my soft skills. So focusing on coding, problem solving, working on different projects, and just understanding how systems function end to end as a problem solver. And I think that foundation that I built really helped me later go on to understand how businesses operate from a systems and architecture perspective. And I would say not just from the surface level.
That's great. And at what point did your career begin to move towards entrepreneurship and working with businesses directly?
So this happened at one of Roland's events in San Diego. Before that, I had spent about 2 to 3 years, working on closing deals on my own. I did successfully close one before I met my partners at MergeWorks, but I was, trying to learn about the space, understanding how I can really leverage my strengths in the technical space to close deals. And that's where I met my partners that I currently have at MergeWorks now. And they had strong experience in building and scaling businesses. They'd been doing so for about 30 or so years. And they decided recently that they wanted to move into acquisitions and focusing on scaling existing businesses and leveraging their experience in that. So what they really needed was a technical partner who could handle building all of our automation systems from sourcing to closing and the tech side of scaling businesses. So I kind of came in as that bridge that connected business strategy with technical execution. And that's really what led to building what we're doing now at MergeWorks.
Brilliant. Okay. And what type of businesses do you typically work with when helping them to grow or prepare for acquisitions? Is it quite a variety, or is it a particular niche that you look at?
So we're quite industry agnostic, but for the time being, we focused on mainly consumer-based businesses. So we worked across ed tech, luxury travel, medical spas, events, dental clinics, and some sports like golf and soccer. So we don't really lock ourselves into one industry, but we've developed a much stronger playbook for consumer businesses than we have in other verticals. And then we usually we adapt that playbook based on the industry or the vertical that we're in.
Okay. So When you first start working with one of these companies, what are the most common operational challenges that you see? Where are the opportunities to help those businesses most, do you think?
Yeah, so the biggest one I would say is outdated systems. And this usually happens because a lot of business owners, especially the ones that we work with who are potentially looking to retire or exit, a lot of them have been running their businesses for about 20 years, 30 years, some even like 40 to 50. And they're still doing things very manually because that's how they always structured it. And they don't, a lot of them just never really adapted the way that they run their business. So I noticed that a lot of them take sales calls themselves, still track everything, in spreadsheets or on pen and paper. And so on one hand, that's a huge opportunity because like there's a lot of low hanging fruit, a lot of opportunity to scale. But on the other hand, it does mean that a lot of times we have to rebuild our systems from the ground up and invest a lot in resources, which is why we usually have a structured onboarding period for at least about 3 months to get everything in place properly.
Yeah, 3 months is not a long time either, is it? So that
It's
sounds like
not. No,
no, it's
it is.
quite an
Yeah,
intensive period, especially
for
when a
sure.
business has been working for, well, maybe tens of years in that system. Yeah, I'm of the generation where, you were brought up with Excel, so you become very
For
proficient with
sure.
Excel, and it's so hard to let go of those sort of tools. So, I mean,
Completely. Yeah.
obviously, it's replacing tools like that. I don't know, what role do the systems generally, automation and technology play in helping these businesses scale successfully when you're, just working with a relatively short time scale? And maybe some resistance from the business owners and the team members that are there.
For sure. I think systems as a whole, in terms of businesses are everything. Like without a system, businesses tend to fail or unable to keep up and things like that. So they're the reason I would say a business has survived and generated cash flow in the first place. But I think what defines a good system now and potentially when a lot of these business owners started is that what defines a good system has completely changed. So before it was, hiring the right people, and that is still important, don't get me wrong, solid processes, consistency, making sure that, you have the right playbooks, the right industry knowledge. But I think now without automation and AI, it's very hard to scale. So that's, I would say, a core part of business systems now. And I would say technology, especially AI automation, has lowered the barrier so much to entry that businesses that, don't adapt as well tend to fall behind quickly. But the ones that do adapt, they reduce costs, they scale faster, they rely a lot less on manual work. Their systems can mostly run without them. And at this point, I would say it's not optional. It's a necessity. So that's I would say yeah, it's a pretty much a core foundation of business systems at this point. But I think the main reason that they struggle is something that I mentioned a little bit briefly earlier. It's firstly, and this is something that we even struggle with a little bit. It's the change of pace. So everything in AI and automation is evolving so fast that it's hard to really know where to start. And they're also and business owners are also worried that whatever they build today, like let's say they build an agent using N8N like a few weeks ago, but then Claude Code came out and it's now a much faster way and easier and even better way to build agents on your computer. So whatever they build today will sort of could, potentially be outdated next week with an even better tool, an even better system, an even better platform that could erase the work you did previously. And secondly, a lot of these owners, I would say, have been running their businesses the same way for decades. So shifting their entire way of operating, I would say, is a really big mental jump. And there's also some like fear around it.
How do you sort of see the systems? Because obviously there's a lot of evolution, sort of incremental gains that the business has built up through its lessons over time. You know, are you helping these businesses, and are they helping you as well to understand the lessons that they've learned over time, why they do certain things a certain way, or more broadly, I suppose, about what they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to avoid through the ways that they're doing things to help you then redesign new systems that are going to really allow them to grow and scale up, or are their systems very detailed, very very rigidly designed? This is how we do it, and it's a step by step process. Is it more broad or is it more? detailed? What are you dealing with?
I think most of the times it's more broad, and when an owner knows their industry so well, it's really hard for them to sit down with you even if you have 3 months to a year. They've spent decades building their business in this industry and they know it in and out. So I would say it's really hard for them to really just sit down and explain to someone who may not be as familiar with their industry but is coming in on a different side from a business angle and a technical angle to explain to them that this is how we operate our business, because they would have tons of back end knowledge that we wouldn't have. So a lot of times what we try to do is we try to at least keep them on for at least a year and a half or 2 years. And we try to maintain their legacy in the business, but bring in our systems as well as as a part of it, and then sort of try to combine them together. Because at the end of the day, with the business, they've built it with their legacy for the past 30 to 40 years, and the systems do revolve around that. So we want to make sure that we can preserve that as well, whilst bringing in, I would say, more new systems that might change the way the business operates completely.
Yeah, some of the podcasts that I've got coming up are talking in detail about change management, but just
Yeah.
in general, is that a big issue for, or not an issue necessarily, but a major consideration and a task in itself when you are bringing in brand new techniques, new tools, new systems for the employees that might have worked there for a long time themselves and have got very much into a routine about how to go about doing things. I don't know. Some of them might be reinvigorated. Some of them might be rejuvenated and excited by the prospect of really, taking the business to a new level, updating their skills. Or is it actually, we know how to do our job, why are you changing everything we do? What are you having to deal with in that respect?
I think sometimes, especially because the owner does exit, more than the owner, the hardest part is adapting, is employees adapting to it. A lot of them are, they have this, like, and I've spoken to a lot of C-suite executives about this, and they mentioned that a lot of employees, they're having a really tough time with getting them to really start using AI, because there is this fear that they're going to lose their job, that comes with it. And it's something that, the media and the news and everyone has been talking about, has been portrayed. And it's not completely wrong. Like, stats have really shown that there's more layoffs that happened recently, and certain roles are being replaced with AI. So it is sometimes a struggle to get them to adapt and to see the positive behind it when they have this fear inside them that they're going to be losing their job, or that their role will be replaced. But I think the ones that really do start to adopt it in even their own workflows, their own practices, their own systems, those are usually the ones that I would say thrive in those specific businesses. And the way, as an owner, that I feel like you can approach that is just simply by just showing them, like, talking to them about, this is really how you can adopt it, and just showing them in their workflow that just pick one small thing, um, and start by automating that process of your work. And they'll start to open up their mind and see how much easier it's become to work on it, instead of looking at it like, oh, it's going to take over my job. And I think employees are one of the hardest bottlenecks when coming into a business, about getting them to adopt using AI and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, there's a big role of almost education, but certainly awareness
Yeah.
amongst these
Awareness for sure.
these people, which really should then provide an opportunity for them to naturally develop that into a desire to actually really want to embrace these changes because
For sure.
you know they're obviously going to be fearing the worst, worrying about their job, but actually you're looking to scale the business. And that, it's hard to find new good recruits. It's better if you can keep the good recruits that you've already got and develop them. And, I think roles are changing, or are going to
Dramatically.
change a lot, certainly over the next few years, if not sooner, just by the need really to embrace AI and learn how to think different. Hopefully, then I think if anybody once you start to learn how to use AI and you can see the benefits of it, it's actually empowering. It really helps you do your job better and to focus on the things that you really prefer doing in your job, not all the in the first instance mundane sort of tasks and stuff
Yeah.
which is administrative. Yeah, no, I get that. So if a company is just starting to explore AI, what would you suggest as first practical steps they should take? I mean, we've talked about processes and the problems that might present themselves by trying to automate something which is already a bad process or an old-fashioned process or missing steps or something like that. I don't know. I'm trying to put words in your mouth maybe, but what do
Yeah.
you think? What do you suggest?
Yeah, I usually think there are two ways that businesses can approach it, and it would really depend on the owner and what they think is best. But the first option, which at least personally I found to be the easiest when first starting out with AI, is starting really small, like picking one workflow that owners would say is the most repetitive and time consuming. What we've found that most owners, when they come and talk to us, that what they're looking for is really help on sales and marketing. So specifically lead generation, because clients are the backbone of every business. And so a lot of times they would want to pick one workflow, like let's say lead generation. How do they go about generating leads at the moment? Is it that they send cold emails and, attract their typical clientele and then bring them to a sales call, and then close it there? If that's the case, then I think you could always build a workflow or build an agent that could, scrape the leads of your right clientele for you, automatically send that email out with just a quick integration, and then pretty much bring them to a sales call with your team. That's one example of, how a business could just pick one side of things that they would say is repetitive and time consuming and something that they really need, and just try to automate that one part instead of uh, looking at it like, you know, like it's a little bit overbearing to think about using AI in your entire business. So just picking one workflow, and just trying that out. It's like a little quick win, and then it might encourage an owner to want to do more. Another option I would say that sometimes it's a little bit more complicated, but it works. I would say it works the best because it builds from the foundation. So some businesses, they want to rebuild everything around AI from the ground up. So basically using AI models, I would say, as the brain of the business and then layering the systems on top. It sounds really complex in theory, but I would say with today's tools, a lot of it can actually be done just by prompting, like without coding. So it's another approach a business can look at, but it would take a little bit of research, a little bit of investment into that.
Yeah, that all makes sense as well. And I think, lead generation is an obvious first place to start, ignoring the fact that, encouraging individuals when you're within your business to start experimenting with AI on a personal level, just to start feeling a little bit more comfortable with, what it is, that it's not scary, it's actually quite
Mhm.
interesting, can be quite fun. But yeah, that return on investment opportunity that comes from that lead generation helps to then start to pay for itself very quickly, and it gives you confidence that actually, yes,
Yeah.
you've got a
And
strong foundation there.
yeah, and of course, and I would say a lot of owners who've never really experimented with technology or AI still would I would say personally struggle to want to build these workflows, even if it's just like, even if you
Of
would say
course.
it's one workflow and you would try it. So something that I think has worked for a lot of owners we've worked with is potentially just bringing on someone really young to the team who's like, really willing to learn and willing to build and willing to adapt. We've experienced that with a lot of, I would say, Gen Zers who are very, they're heading right into the brink of the AI space, and a lot of them know in their heart and in their head that if they don't fully adopt it into their life, if they don't really learn how to use it, how to build with it, that they're going to fall behind. So a lot of times, if these business owners just choose to hire maybe one or two people, really willing and eager to learn and wanting to build onto their team that can do it for them, I think it's also an easy way to sort of get past it without feeling the need to put on that pressure and build it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Mhm.
that's a good point. I
Yeah.
think,
Mhm.
obviously businesses need a bit of a strategy for implementation, and it's,
Yeah.
not just a go for it and then leave it alone. It's an ongoing process of
100.
maybe drip feeding new aspects into the AI adoption process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
that
the biggest problem is the mind block, so I think once it gets started, it's much easier to flow through. Like, that's
yeah.
something noticed, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
Mm.
from the business sector that I've worked in, it's very much consultancy or time sensitive sort of work, really. It's very hard for those sort of businesses to find the time themselves to really put to this. But there has to be some kind of investment, even if it's a drip feed. What can you afford to put into it through your staff, and having a champion on board to really be the
Yeah.
trailblazer, maybe, and to test these systems, give some good feedback, and be there to help. Have somebody on hands for the other employees to call on. As they're getting
Yeah.
used to it as well, makes a lot of sense. So, from your perspective, working in how could AI change the way businesses prepare for acquisitions, for example, in the future? Can you see how that might happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is already really changing how deals are sourced and evaluated. A lot of times deals can take months to close. Like we've just experienced a deal recently that's been ongoing for the past 8 months, like just back and forth and things like that. And it can really take a long time because there's a lot there's a lot of due diligence involved. You don't want to buy a business with a lot of risk and then pay for it later. Or, there's a lot of legal involved, which I think is something that in general we still struggle to automate because the legal side of things it can be really tricky. But other than that, I think you can pretty much automate most of deal sourcing, scoring opportunities. So most people who are looking to buy a business, they set a scoring of, of what they're looking for, like their own acquisition criteria. I think what AI can do is it can pretty much score that for you automatically. And it can identify risks earlier that you may not be able to see yourself, like red flags or risks in a business that can avoid you from closing a deal that might hurt you later in the long run. So I think those are important things when it comes to looking at acquisitions that I think has allowed things to speed up a lot faster and has allowed us to avoid taking on what I would call like a bad deal or a deal that, we don't want to pay for later. I would say in the long run, it also allows businesses to scale more efficiently. So it makes strategies like roll ups a lot more powerful. And on the integration side, if you're looking at, horizontal acquisition, then if you already have the systems built, then you can plug them into new acquisitions much faster. Like if a business owner is looking to acquire more businesses in their own vertical and they have the automation systems in their own business in place, then they can quickly just implement that same system and that same playbook into the new business that they acquire. So I think all in all, it's made the process just a lot more efficient, and a lot less risky.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. And being on the other side, I've been involved in an acquisition from the seller's side, and there is a lot of information required during the due diligence process, and the longer it takes to do it, the more information is required because things have changed during that period potentially.
A lot.
And you've got more than one source of this information being requested coming through. You could have the financial people, you can have the operational people, you can have the legal people asking
Mhm.
various questions. And quite often it felt like the same questions phrased slightly differently and asking for slightly different durations of data were coming
Yeah.
through, making the whole process seemingly a lot less efficient than it could have
Mhm.
been. And especially when maybe you're a small business, you only have so many resources available to you to respond to this information whilst you're running the business at the same time. It can get quite unnecessarily burdensome, shall we say. So, yeah, I can personally see that if I don't know if the communication's not there on the buyer side to really coordinate how the
It's
information
difficult.
requests are
Yeah.
coming through. AI could really help this whole process and just hopefully speed up the whole process, due diligence and acquisition.
Yeah.
Is there any Are there any other ways that you think AI could make the due diligence and integration process easier for buyers and sellers? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think for buyers, like at least one of the biggest areas that AI is improving, and a lot of these bigger AI companies, they're very focused on, tools that can now analyze financials, go through sort of operational due diligence, like flag risks and speed it up a lot faster, as mentioned before. And I think it doesn't only make the process faster, but it makes it a lot less expensive. Whereas like before you really had to recruit an entire due diligence team for operations and financials, an entire legal team, and potentially even a sourcing team to go and, source deals. Now most of it can be scraped on the web, on market deals. And it makes things much it I would say it makes things much quicker as a whole. I think on the seller side, one benefit I see is that a lot of sellers, especially, that we've worked with, I would say they've never really sold a business before. So they don't know how the whole process works. And a lot of times, when you're a seller and you're going to sell your business, you are very, very overprotective of it, which completely makes sense because you built it from the ground up for a long time. But I think what AI has been able to do is been able to sort of objectify the process a little bit more, as in put in, okay, these are what the valuation numbers should look like, depending on cash flow and depending on what processes are needed for the seller, and just make the process a little bit easier for them to go through, because it is a very emotional process, and it's sometimes a process where sellers a lot of time tend to put in their own emotional value and things like that into the business, which completely makes sense. And it's something that still cannot be overridden, but I think AI can make the process of getting sellers to get through it a little bit.
Yeah, it reminds me of buying and selling a house a little bit in that,
Yeah,
in the UK, at least, if you're going to buy a property, there is the equivalent of a due diligence process that you've got to go through, or the
of course.
mortgage
Yeah.
company might need to go through with
Hmm.
surveys and such like. And yeah, if you've never sold a business before, you don't actually know what questions are going to be asked of you,
Hmm.
and what information even is going to be requested, such that there must be there needs to be guardrails with AI. It does make mistakes. You do need to
For
verify what
sure.
it's saying, but as a good start point, it could really help businesses start to prepare for the process once that process starts. So even if they're thinking of maybe selling a business in the next year, it could well be right. This might well help you get your house in order, get all the information lined up, have everything ready, so that the actual due diligence and acquisition process is much
Hmm.
more speedy. And as you say,
Yeah.
keeping lawyers' costs down, etc., the quicker that you can do this work is definitely going to save you money. And it
Yeah.
probably gives you a bit more confidence that you feel like you're well prepared for that whole process.
Of
I don't know. I'm
course.
thinking from my experience, but yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And one other thing I would say, just in the long run, is a lot of times when businesses are looking to sell, they can significantly increase their valuation of their company if they really get their systems in order. So if they get a lot of things automated and the owner isn't as involved as they would have to be, when they exit. So if the owner is maybe in the business like 40 hours a week, I would say it makes the business a little bit less valuable to someone who's looking to buy it, because then they would need to either replace them with a manager, or would need to, and a lot of times the owners also have those client relationships and things like that. But if all of those processes can be, automated, and AI can come in and be that sort of source for it, I think it would not only save in terms of cash flow and increase the valuation, but I think that company itself would be a lot more valuable to business owners, and they could probably get more for it than they would otherwise. So I think that's another thing to consider.
I think I think that's an interesting point actually,
Mhm.
because a buyer of a business might be seeing the opportunity to vastly improve a business. So on the one hand, they might take a lot of interest in that particular business because the opportunity for improvement and scale is much bigger. However, there's a lot of risk associated
Yeah.
with that business. But if a business has its house fully in order and very well set up
Yeah.
and very efficiently run, then that risk is much lower, and obviously that is attractive to a buyer as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
competing thoughts. So I've got some quick fire sort of questions for you. Don't need to go into depth, but in your opinion, what is maybe the one thing that business owners maybe often misunderstand even of AI when you start raising that question or prospect?
think I think from what I've seen from business owners I've seen and spoken to, some people are scared of it, taking their data and things like that, and think that they need to overhaul everything at once. But I think you really don't. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's okay to start small with one workflow, one practice, one small area that you can optimize.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe one practical AI tool or idea that almost any business could benefit from today. Just a very simple one.
I think Claude Code, it's something where you can download it as an MCP server on your computer, and you can prompt it to act like your own personal assistant on your computer. So all it takes is prompting. You don't need to do any backend integration or any coding.
That sounds good. And finally, I ask each guest this question, but what is one must read book you can recommend to me and our audience? What do you think?
My favorite book I've ever read is Measure What Matters. It's all about OKRs and how setting the right goals can completely transform how a business operates. And I think that's something that has changed just personally my mindset as a whole. So yeah,
Brilliant. Well, if you can send me that link, I will include
I
that
will.
on our social posts.
Yeah.
So, Tricia, thank you so much for sharing your experience and insights today. I know we're going to do another podcast in the future, going into much more detail about AI
Hmm.
implementation. So everyone should look out for that. But it was fascinating hearing about your journey from technology into scaling businesses and how you're applying AI in very practical ways. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. And one quick thing, I loved how you compared it to a house. That was very interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So if you enjoyed this episode too, please follow Aligned Minds AI on LinkedIn for practical AI tips and updates on future episodes of Aligned on AI. I will share details of today's podcast and guest on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Spotify. So thanks for listening all, or viewing, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.